travel to parties in the US now, Saloni, Khushbu and Mohammad Imran. So this was a part of work that we did at this Yoga and Neuroimaging Lab at IIT Delhi. And essentially, that's my personal interest, passion to be involved in the scientific investigation of human mind. And we have the 3 departments that are involved in this: School of Information Technology, Computer Science, and NRCD. And neuroimaging part is done in the upper 2, and the yogic part is done in the 3rd at NRCD. We had this discussion, and essentially, this research is inspired by studying the human mind. And why do you want to study human mind? Because happiness which I get is the cause, or is the source, or at least is the pursuit, is the reason for pursuit of every activity. So whatever we are doing so that we can be happy. And despite all of this, we see in the last 20 years robust growth in psychiatric disorders. And now situation is turning from bad to worse, because there are wars, recession, crimes, and all kinds of things. And all these problems have origin in the human mind. If you understand the mind well, then maybe, and if you understand how to be happy, then maybe all these problems can be solved. And then also there is this philosophical question that is very interesting. There is some school of thought which believe that it's the matter that gives rise to the consciousness and mind. Whereas if you look at the Indic thought, it's the other way. They say that it's the mind that gives rise to the consciousness of the matter. So, those pursuits are very interesting and, worthy to investigate. I already talked about first person and third person method. And the third person method, which is objective sciences, mostly related to neuroimaging, clinical trials, and the first person mostly related to yoga and mindfulness. Those who are interested in going deeper can look into this very nice TED talk, a very nice talk, Google talk, by Alan Wallace, Towards the First Revolution in Mind Sciences. He very beautifully lays out, the research scenario and how we can progress in the mind sciences. And what he says is the techniques of the first person methods are very, very good technique to advance this particular science. So this is my talk overview. I'll just start with introducing what Yoga Nidra is. Then we talk about the neuroimaging pilot that we did. Now we are in the process of doing a much bigger study, but that's ongoing right now. But I'll just show some early results that we got. And then finally a randomized control trial that we do in Yoga Nidra. So what is Yoga Nidra? So as of now, most of the people are aware of 3 states of consciousness: the waking state, the dream sleep or the REM sleep state, and the deep sleep state. So this has been very well understood. And all these 3 states have very distinctive EEG patterns. Right? So you can look at the alpha, beta, gamma, delta patterns, and based on that you can identify which of these 3 states the person is in. But the yogic literature claims a 4th state of consciousness, and well, maybe this is not exactly accurate, but let me just for now just stick to that. The 4th state of consciousness is called Turiya. It has mentioned in the Mandukya Upanishad, and the person in the Turiya state is like in a state of deep sleep, but with wakeful alertness. So that is the thing that has been very well documented in the yogic texts. And not only one, but there are more than one text that talk about this. And not only this, there are people who have demonstrated the existence of such a state. Unfortunately, the time when the experiment was done, our scientific church, I might call it, was not ready to accept such things. So Swami Rama, he went to the US in 1973, and Menger Foundation, he did lots of experiments. Lots of experiments were done on him. And one particular experiment was on the sleep state. So they put a EEG on, and he was made to lie down, and he went into the stage where EEG was producing delta waves, which is a sign of deep sleep. This is biomarker for a deep sleep state. But while the experiments were going on, some happenings happened, some incidents happened in the lab. They were discussing certain things and all. Once he came out of that state, he actually recounted all the incidents that happened accurately and correctly. And there's a book also, Beyond Biofeedback by Elmer Green, that documents this thing. But at that time, they were not able to publish this result, because what they believed was, if they publish it, then they will be outcast from the scientific literature, because, something.
So, Just a clarification question. So what does the behavior of such a person look like? Are they just walking around? Are they sitting still? Are they lying down?
What they say is one can maintain this Turiya state even while walking around and talking to people. And that is really possible. That's what the claim is. And I'm told that his disciple Swami Ved Bharati, who left his body a few years back, a lot of EEG was performed on him also, and there also we observed a flat EEG and those kind of things. So this was the inspiration, but finding Yoga Nidra is kind of more difficult to analyze, so we settled down with something which is less, which I called Yoga Nidra practice. So Yoga Nidra is a state, which is the fourth state, called the Turiya state, but Yoga Nidra practice is an audio guided meditation, and it is generally practiced when you lie down. It's generally supposed to be practiced by lying down. So you lie down, put on the instructions, whatever the instructions are saying, you follow those instructions, and it's like a guided meditation practice. Also a method of conscious relaxation. It's related to what is called the eye rest. This has been taken in the West and branded with a different name and different trademark and studied and all. And in fact, veterans, US war veterans have been given this kind of a eye rest kind of protocol to help them get over the PTSDs and those kind of things. And somewhat related to Jacobson, but I guess Jacobson progressive muscle relaxation was slightly independent from this. But what do yogic texts claim? That Yoga Nidra practice can induce a sleep-like state. Now we are talking about Yoga Nidra practice. It can give benefits which are associated with sleep, and it can be more efficient than sleep. Which means that 1 hour of a Yoga Nidra practice can give you sleep benefit that may be 2 or 3 hours of actual sleeping. So we wanted to test these hypotheses. But before that, the Yoga Nidra, now if you look, when we started there was just a few versions of Yoga Nidra available, but now there are many versions. If you go to YouTube and search for Yoga Nidra, you will find hundreds of versions. But this technique was revived in the modern times by Bihar School of Yoga, Swami Satyanand Saraswati, and he has 4 or 5 different variants of this. But now there are many other yoga traditions are also doing that. So what happens when you lie down? There are different stages. The first stage is internalization. The consciousness or the awareness is brought inside the body, and then there is a body rotation and things like that. Sankalpa, rotation of consciousness, breath awareness, manifestation of opposites, creative visualization, and so on. So different practices have different these kind of things. Personally, I found it very effective in overcoming jet lag. So whenever I'm jet lagged or less sleep, I try to do it. Helps in relaxation and stress management. So the kind of questions we wanted to answer is, does Yoga Nidra practice actually get you to a sleep-like state? That's number one. And does it give you the benefit of sleep? Right? And it has been well documented that cognitive performance becomes better once you're refreshed. You get a good night's sleep in the morning. There are tasks that you can work on and your cognitive performance will be better. And then finally, what brain areas get involved when you're doing the Yoga Nidra practice. So with these things, we started a pilot study. The first pilot that we did was on functional MRI, and that was supposed to answer the third question, that which areas get involved when we are doing the Yoga Nidra practice. And how many people are aware of functional MRI? Oh. And you have worked with the fMRI? Okay, great. So I'll just go very quickly over a primer on fMRI, just so that everybody is on the same page. So structural, so there are 2 types of brain imaging modalities. One is a structural imaging, where you just figure out what is the structure of the brain, what is it made of. Right? So, and typically we use CT, MRI or PET for this. And MRI equipment is quite sophisticated. It has composed of various types of magnets and coils, and they produce these strong magnetic fields and RF fields, and through that we measure what's inside. Functional brain imaging is it actually measures how does the brain work, so what is happening inside the brain. So structural says what it is made of, functional actually says how it is working. So it's like a 3D movie of a brain. So the structural image will give you a 3D map of the brain, how it looks, and a functional will give you a 4D map. The fourth dimension is the time dimension. How various activity, how the activity is changing in different parts of the brain. And fMRI is a very popular modality for getting the functional field. So just step back. This is what we see is the first brain imaging machine, and here the subject is made to lie down on a table which is balanced at the center by this point, very delicately balanced. And then what happens is you ask the subject to perform a task, maybe think of something like this. So here is the cartoon. This is done by Angelo Mosso back in late 18 something or early 1910. And then you ask the subject to think about something, maybe in this case it's a hard problem the person is thinking about, and what you observe is that this perfectly balanced scale, when the person begins to think, it tilts in this direction, right? And the reason it happens is that thinking requires energy consumption, which forces the blood to come to the brain. So there is more blood flow in the brain, so the blood rushes from the lower part of the body to the head, and this causes the imbalance in this. So this is the first brain imaging experiment, just a single bit of measurement it does, the activity in the overall activity in the brain. But fundamentally, functional MRI is not much different from this, because fMRI also uses the changes in the blood flow to figure out where is the brain activity. So it does not measure the neuronal activity directly, it measures the changes in the blood flow. So it's an indirect measure of activation. And once you record fMRI from a person, what you get is a map like this, and every point in the brain you can get a time series like this, and this time series is actually representing a magnetic signal which is dependent on the blood flow. So it's called the BOLD signal, blood oxygenation level dependency. Right? So this is what you measure through fMRI. But that does not tell you about brain function. You get some random looking wave pattern like this. So the task for fMRI analysis is to actually convert that into a brain mapping. And for that, what is typically done is these subjects are made to perform an experiment or a task inside the scanner. The task could be something like a finger tapping task or something of that sort. So here what you see in the red is what is called a block-based design, where if you see this high, which means the person is doing the task. Let's say it's a finger tapping task. So at these times from here to here, the person is tapping the finger, and from here to here, the person inside the scanner is just staying idle, not doing anything. So that is what is called a task paradigm. And then fMRI analysis looks at the BOLD signal at every voxel and it correlates it with a task paradigm. And wherever the correlation is high, we say that this area of the brain is activated. So that is in a sense what fMRI analysis does. And there are these different types of designs. So the key thing in fMRI is that the data is extremely noisy. So you cannot just do a single repetition of experiment and be done with it. The experiment has to be repeated over and over again, maybe 10 times or 20 times. So for example, if you look at these blocks, so these blocks have to be repeated, 5 or 10 or 20 times. And then you aggregate the data over multiple blocks and use some statistical methods to actually figure out where the activations are. And all this we need to do because the data is very noisy. So just by a single experiment we cannot figure it out. Yeah, so finally what happens in the end, when you do all that statistical analysis, you can say, you can get a map like this. These are called statistical parameter map. So at the bottom here, at the grayscale, you see the brain image, which is a structural image of the brain. And the superimposed is the red and yellow, which is what is called a statistical parametric map. And this tells you that in these regions, the voxels showed very high correlation with the experimental paradigm. So in other words, these voxels seem to be getting activated when the experiment was on, and when the experiment was off, they were not getting activated. So this is how 90% of the fMRI papers that you see, this is the kind of analysis they do. But the problem is that for this kind of analysis, we need a task paradigm, because we want to find which brain area is getting activated in response to a particular task. So the entire task has to be repeated over and over again to get statistical power. So most task conditions that end up in the experiments are highly unnatural. They don't represent naturalistic paradigm. And typical naturalistic situations could be, when the person is talking to a friend, or watching a movie, or just, doing something. And similarly like meditation. So none of these can be studied with this kind of paradigm because of limitations of the experiment design. So for example, if you want to analyze the Yoga Nidra, then you would have to make these blocks, and you have to repeat this over and over again in short blocks, 1 or 2 minute blocks. But that will defeat the purpose of Yoga Nidra, because Yoga Nidra itself is a 45-minute exercise. You're doing certain things in a particular sequence. So there's no hope of analyzing such a data using the conventional techniques. And that has been the main problem why such techniques have not been studied in the literature in the West mostly. But the hope is not lost, because there is a new method that has been recently developed. It's called the inter-subject correlation method. So if you look at this cartoon on the right, in general linear model, what we do, we look at a time series of a particular point in the brain and we correlate it to the experimental paradigm. Okay? And then wherever the correlation is high, we say that it is activated. Okay? Doing all the statistics after that. What does inter-subject correlation do? We look at, let's say there are two subjects and they're made to go inside the scanner, and they go through the exactly same experimental paradigm. Okay? So whatever task the subject 1 has to do, exactly same task in the exact same timings the subject 2 also has to do. Now instead of correlating this voxel's time series with the task paradigm, the voxel time series of subject I is compared with the voxel time series of subject J of the same voxel. Right? And if we see high correlations, then what can we conclude? We can say that these two subjects were scanned at two different times, and still this particular voxel, the activity, the time series of the activity or time series of the bold is correlated. Now what is common between these two subjects? It's highly unlikely that it is just a random coincidence that the correlation is high. So only thing that is common is that the stimulus that they are seeing, and this correlation must be caused because of that stimulus. And if the correlation is caused because of the stimulus, that means this voxel must be getting activated and getting deactivated. So that is the basic idea, and this is work by Uri Hasson. He coined a term called neurocinematics because the first experiment he did, he showed movies to the subjects inside the scanner. So while they were inside the scanner, they were watching movies, and he correlated the brain responses of different subjects, and based on that he figured out which areas of the brain are getting activated. So there's nothing sacrosanct about movie. What we can do now is put the people inside the scanner, have them do Yoga Nidra, and we apply the same technique, and we measure the correlation across two different brains, and wherever we see the correlation is high, we can be fairly sure that this high correlation is because the same stimulus is being applied, which is the Yoga Nidra. So the brain is responding to Yoga Nidra in this. So to test this, we had one subject and 2 scans we did with some intermediate practice of Yoga Nidra, 45 minutes of instructions, verbal instruction in English by Swami Niranjananand of Bihar School of Yoga, and these are the stages in the Yoga Nidra protocol. And what we see is when we correlate the brain responses, the areas in the language areas, right, and auditory regions get high correlations, which means that the auditory region is getting activated while the practice is going on. And which makes sense because they are listening to the audio instructions, so that should happen, right? Auditory and language regions should come. But interestingly, what we are also seeing is anterior cingulate cortex and amygdala, which is related to emotion processing. And interestingly, in the Yoga Nidra, there is no explicit emotion stimuli applied to you. So they don't say that, feel good, feel bad, or nothing like that. They only say, feel the sensations and, feel the lightness and heaviness and cold and hot and those kind of things. But why is it stimulating areas related to emotions? That is something which is very interesting. But this is just one scan, right? One subject, so we can't be very conclusive. So you'll have to actually do a full study to be able to say that. Another area that you get is precuneus and post-frontal cortex, and PCC, and this was getting activated when the chakras were getting visualized, and that is something very interesting. There can be two things here. One could be PCC and precuneus is also related to what is called default mode networks, and it could be because of that, or it could be also because PCC to QNS is related to self-referential processing, and the notion of self is also very much related to the notion of chakras in the yogic literature. So the personality is very much closely related to chakras. So it could be because of that, we don't know. We see visual cortex during rotation of consciousness and visualization, and somatosensory cortex as expected. And in fact, what we did was we broke down into various stages, and then we looked at what areas get activated in different stages. And there also, for example, this amygdala in ACC gets activated when we are either doing sensations of heat and cold, or when we are doing the past recall. So that is something very interesting, because one of the things that sleep does is emotional memory reconsolidation. Right? That is known function of sleep. And this past recall is not past recall from years. This past recall instructions are actually just what happened yesterday, what happened from the morning and all. But if these areas are getting involved, maybe they have some role in emotional consolidation. I don't know. So this is something very interesting. So we are planning a larger study on this. We are very encouraged by what we get. And the larger study, we already have collected some data. And in this, we are actually becoming a little more greedy. We collected data for 2 meditations. One was the Yoga Nidra, which was 20 minutes. And then there was a mindfulness-based stress reduction protocol. So we collected data for both. Yeah. So we had data for 24 subjects. Yeah, between 24 and 30. Like some subjects did not record some sessions and all, but about this. And what we used was, we tried to get advanced practitioners. And advanced practitioners we did not measure as some other methods where they count the number of hours of meditation. Instead, we counted the number of hours of yogic practices. So yogic practices also include asana, pranayama, meditation, and also service activity if done in that spirit. So average yogic experience was about 3,000 hours and 20 males, and mean age of 27 years. So this data we looked at functional connectivity. What is functional connectivity? So functional connectivity is another method that is used for fMRI processing, which looks at one voxel and finds its correlation with another voxel. So in other words, how different brain areas are communicating with each other, how they are jointly getting activated and deactivated. It measures that. And there's a lot of work, recent work in resting state functional connectivity. So person is at rest, yet a lot of areas actually fire together. And what people are finding is this resting state functional connectivity can be used to fingerprint the brain, and also it changes with age, it changes with mental state, and it changes with disorders. So for example, if somebody is having depression, if you just do the general linear model based analysis on that data, you may not be able to distinguish a normal person, a healthy person, from a person suffering from these illnesses. But if you do resting state functional connectivity analysis, then you are more likely to be able to distinguish between these. So that is the kind of thing that we are finding. So here, so on the picture on the left here shows the functional connectivity, where which area is connected to which other area of the brain. But we can also look at inter-subject functional connectivity. This is a very recent technique that has come out in 2016. And here what we do is we look at one point in the brain of one person and correlate it with the time series of another point in the brain of another person. So let's just think about it a little bit. So when we are looking at functional connectivity, we look at the time series of one and correlate it with the time series of another box. Now in fMRI data analysis, what happens is that the bold signal that you get is a combination of a reflection of a neural activity plus also some physiological activity, which is like the heart beating, the blood flowing, just because of normal this thing. So you get a lot of noise, what is called a physiological noise, if you find this correlation, because this is not really reflecting the correlation between the neural activity in those two areas. It is reflecting a correlation between the neural activity as well as physiological activities related to blood flow. So it's a combination of these two. But here if we have subject X and subject Y going through the same paradigm, then the neural activity, which is because of the task. So let's say they are both watching the same movie in the scanner. So the neural activity which happens because of watching the movie is going to be the same. But the physiological activity which is related to the heartbeat and breathing is going to be different for subject X and subject Y. So when we find the correlation of 1 with 2 here, the physiological activity, the physiological noise is going to get cancelled, and what you will see is just the correlation between the neural activity. So that's the beauty of this technique. Yeah, so we looked at the ISFC, inter-subject functional connectivity. It's still a work in progress. It's, still data cleaning and all needs to be done, but we'll just get some interesting results to show you. So what we see is, so this was the correlation of the task with the auditory signal. This is again to show that they were listening to the instructions. This is the inter-subject correlation results, and here again we see auditory regions getting correlated and the frontal regions. But the interesting thing is, and also what we see is correlations in cerebellar regions and middle frontal gyrus and somatosensory cortex. But when you look at the inter-subject functional connectivity, that's where you get very, very interesting results. So, for example, this picture shows the connectivity of an area called superior temporal gyrus with the rest of the brain, and the areas which are red are the areas which are showing very high connectivity with superior temporal gyrus. So another region of the brain, insula, which is involved in emotional processing and also internalization of attention. And if you look at the connectivity of insula, inter-subject functional connectivity, what we see is it has a very high connectivity with the rest of the brain. So that is something which is very, very interesting, because in the practice you are supposed to internalize the attention, and insula has a role to play, and insula is interacting with the rest of the brain regions for the subject. So that is something very, very interesting. Thalamus. So the thalamus is a region in the brain here, and it actually, most of the sensory inputs from the senses through the neurons and nerves come to the thalamus, and from the thalamus then they get distributed throughout the brain. Now when you look at the connectivity of thalamus, that how this is connected to the rest of it, we are seeing again very interesting patterns of changes in the of actually significant functional connectivity. So these are just very interesting results. We still have not really done the interpretation of the results, but just to kind of demonstrate to you that yes, we can study meditation inside the fMRI scanner using advanced or the newer techniques of data analysis that have come, and this opens up very interesting further research questions, right? How does one meditation differ from another meditation? And then what do these correlations mean? So all those questions are out there and open. But the result that we get are not completely something that we can just they actually are very promising, right? For example, the insula results, the thalamus results. So if you are shutting down your input processing, then maybe your thalamus will be connected differently. So that's something very interesting. So coming back, moving on. Any questions so far? Yes.
So have you thought about looking at since your sort of question was, does it have maybe the benefits of sleep without having to sleep? And then one benefit of sleep, as you indicated, is improvement in memory. So have you thought about doing some kind of memory task after yoga nidra compared to after some other intervention that, well, maybe even mindfulness? That would be quite an interesting comparison, right? You would probably predict improvements in memory compared to mindfulness.
Yeah, thank you. That actually sets up the stage for the next slide. So that's exactly that I'm going to talk about.
Oh, sorry.
Any, yeah.
I understand it correctly that the subjects are also other meditation techniques along with you, or just
No. So they have. so many hours of yogic experience. So we took the subject from one tradition just to maintain uniformity. So in that tradition they have so many hours of practice. Yeah.
This is the art.
Hmm?
The art theory is.
That's right. That's right. Because that's the Yoga Nidra that we use. So they were familiar with that. So therefore, yes.
Yeah, we discussed that there are certain emotions which can be imaged by the neurology. For example, if we have anger, we can see the changes in the brain. So, do we have any correlation for awareness also? For example, that is the thing I think which has not been touched by neurology, or maybe it has not been possible. For example, if I am angry, you can see the changes in the mind, but I know that I am angry. Does this has some kind of correlation, correlation in the mind?
Excellent question. I don't know how to study it because awareness is something that not everybody has it. And how do you create a paradigm where you can bring a person into awareness and outside the awareness, right? If, let's say you're talking about awareness of self, for example, right? That kind of stuff.
No,
Yeah,
is there any difference? For example, a person is awareness about his anger and not aware about his anger. So, is there any difference between the changes in the mind when you map it?
Yes. So that's excellent. I don't know the answer to that, but yeah, those are the yes.
Thank you.
I believe we will need a multidisciplinary approach to study it. Neuroscience, fMRI scans might give certain, aspects, but let's say even epigenetics or the microbiomics, for example, the microbiome profile. So many such things start playing a role when we start analyzing complex phenomena. No, because these are phenomena. Self-awareness is a phenomena. You know that you are self-aware. For example, in meditation, what do we try to do? You set a object where you need to hold your attention, for example, and you know when you have lost attention. Let's say you have traveled down some path, and at a certain point you become aware, oh, I've lost it. Then over a period of time, growth in meditation means that over a period of time, this time between awareness and the other point of awareness, when you become aware that you have lost it, that starts shrinking, that starts reducing. So much so that you are all the time aware, right? So you know that you are aware, and that maybe needs to be studied from a multidisciplinary perspective.
Just a statement here, yeah. Just a statement that it is very delicate to maybe experiment that, because as soon as you are aware, the intensity of anger would go down.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point.
To experimental model, develop this type will be very difficult. Because by the time you know I am angry, I am going for this test, the anger automatically goes.
For example, some actor on the stage, they can create the same.
I have just one question. You put the subject in the MRI machine, and then he went into Yoga Nidra.
Yes. Yes. He went into the Yoga Nidra meditation practice.
Okay.
He didn't go into the state of Yoga Nidra.
Okay. So I had been once in that machine.
Yes.
That's just what we did. But that is very claustrophobic.
Exactly.
That is very.
Once you are in that and then all
Interesting. So at that time, a person can go into that Yoga Nidra state. That itself is a yogic Olympics.
Yes.
That is one. That is one.
That is why only monks are able to do monks.
That is one. Second point of mine is that this anterior genu area which you are getting, seeing that which is stimulated. In 2013 paper, neurology, that this area is also responsible for, it could be a site for self. Self cannot be localized.
Which area?
anterior genu. Anterior
I see.
genu of the
Genu.
corpus callosum.
Of the corpus
Of
callosum.
the corpus callosum,
Okay.
which is coming.
That's
and
right.
Anterior
I
genu.
see.
So that is the area, and surface marking of which is this. Surface marking of which is this
I see.
Bhrumadha.
Mhm.
So this anterior genu area is responsible for the site of self. Self cannot be localized. This is a non-local. Mind is non-local. But here, that is, now you were saying that in Yoga Nidra also, you were finding that area getting stimulated. So this is an interesting finding
Interesting.
in that
Yes.
sense.
Yes.
Because this much I was knowing, but this I am learning.
If I can just add to this, the realization of self or I am, for some of us we can localize it,
Here.
here. Some can localize it here. Some can localize it here. Like that, it depends where you
person.
localize it. Some can localize it outward as well, which is like a special capability. So if you can look at it, it's not just like a fixed phenomenon or a rigid phenomenon
I agree.
mapping. It's like direct correlation.
I agree.
So that becomes very interesting. That's why yoga combined with neuroscience and so on become very useful. Where the path can be multidimensional. How do you design experiments so that it's not like a rigid one-on-one correlation?
And to prove that person has gone into Yoga Nidra, did you also do the EEG study at that time? You see, unless you have dealt away, when somebody is awake, it is not Yoga Nidra.
Even if there's a delta, it's not Yoga Nidra because awareness may not be there. But yeah, that's Turiya we are not targeting. That's very hard. That we need a really accomplished yogi.
But sir, I think research is coming up with this thing where Yoga Nidra has a contribution towards our consciousness, or consciousness is also related with Yoga Nidra. As we have a lot of researches being done in the Albag Educational Institute relating to these topics, and we have research scholars who are into this, and they're coming up with very good results and analysis of the particular
I think that's where a combination where places like this can really excel in the field of mind sciences, because when I talked about the resting state functional connectivity, what they do typically is put a so-called normal person in the scanner and they measure the brain activity. Now this resting state is not at all a resting state, because mind is always wandering. It's like in the past, future and all. Now if we can get a person who has trained his mind, is a yogi, and who can actually focus the attention very, very well, and then we can direct that person to do a particular task and measure, this will enable us to set better baselines, because there the mind is not just wandering into random subjects. So places like these can actually excel in this, because you have access to such people, and plus if you get the equipment, then you can also do those kind of recordings. Yes, there was a question there.
As an option to what someone else mentioned, I have another question, and I'll first say what I wanted to ask earlier. You mentioned amygdala, right?
Mhm.
So are we also looking at, because I know that there are anatomical changes in the brain also with the regular practice of meditation and yoga. Are you also looking at that aspect in this study? One. Second, I've heard it was mentioned here that in terms of meditation, attention or focusing, because my idea of meditation is anything but that. So are we going with that idea that it is an exercise in focus or attention on one object? Is that our idea of meditation?
Okay, so to first question, you're looking at the anatomical changes. We are not yet beginning to study that. An actual rigorous study will require a longitudinal study for several years, and it's extremely hard to do such a study in the current setup right now. But yes, we should definitely go there. That's a very important topic, neuroplasticity, and showing conclusively. Yes, so London taxi drivers, for example, that we know, but through meditation, what are the plastic changes that can be brought about? That we definitely need to study. And it's a very important study, but not right now. Second thing that you talked about, I mean, if you look at the evolution of this field, mindfulness meditation in yoga, especially in the scientific literature, now is the time when it has gotten acceptability. You can write a paper on yoga and you can publish in a good forum and everything. But yoga or meditation is like a sport. Right? Whether it's badminton, table tennis, they are very different sports and very different skill sets. So I think the next wave of the research would be along these lines. Because right now all the research says, okay, here is my favorite meditation, here is my favorite yoga, I did that pre-pose, it led to brain changes, it led to elastic change or whatever, plastic changes in the brain, it led to improvement, right? So that all has been established. But now specializing that, somebody has having OCD, what should you give to that person? Somebody is having depression, what kind of intervention you should give to that person? So those are the kind of questions that will start coming out after this. And that will be the next stage of research that will come up. So very important question, very relevant question. And right now the lay person thinks of meditation as just one thing. But those who are, who has been into this are like, Vigyan Bhairav has 108 types of meditation, and each one, what effect it has, at least in the intermediate stage, right? Maybe finally they will all get to the same state, but yeah, so those are the kind of things very important. Yes.
Please.
These researches has been done in association with doctors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the role in future, for example, if one wishes to take up such research projects? So should a yogic practitioner also be a part of it, or it's like both the parties should be there? How it is? How would you suggest in future projects coming out?
So there's a book by, I think, Swami Vyed, Yogi in the Lab. He actually addresses this question. So I think the people who are expert yogis should be collaborators in this research, because the kind of perspective they can bring that the person who has not been exposed to those things may not be able to bring.
Okay.
Plus, yes, doctors or clinicians and all, they can actually help us interpret the result in the current scientific thinking.
Okay. So
But,
who is the current, this current research, who were the participants who did this research particularly? If you could share, please.
Participants. So we had, so this particular thing was done by Vaibhav, was a student who was driving this research, and the participants were from Art of Living Tradition.
Okay.
And they came, they gave their time.
And Vaibhav is a doctor, right?
Huh?
Vaibhav is doctor.
No, he is not a doctor.
He is not a doctor. Okay.
He is an engineer.
He is an engineer. Okay.
But we had a collaborator from
With
AIIMS, Dr.
AIIMS.
Anju Dhawan,
Okay.
so that's why. So this research would be interdisciplinary. We'll have, we'll need to have people from the yoga side, from the medical side, and possibly an engineer for the data analysis and statistician. Okay, so let me just try to move to the last part of this talk. So this is done by Dr. Vaibhav. You can see him standing there. That's me at the bottom, sitting. So the kind of questions we asked, right? We wanted to see whether the impact of Yoga Nidra is comparable. Yeah, so what were our research questions? Yeah, just going to dive. So first objective was to check using EEG if Yoga Nidra practice induces a sleep-like state. Right? Because the sleep signatures are very well known, so if we can put a EEG cap on, have people do Yoga Nidra, then we can answer this question. Does Yoga Nidra induce a deep state of relaxation? Does it improve cognitive ability? So we didn't have the memory task, we had the cognitive abilities. So we had tasks for that. And does it bring about any physiological changes? The mistake we made was we used Indian classical music as a control. And we had a lot of discussion with Dr. Vaibhav. I wanted to use news as a control. He said no, we should have a comparable control and let it be Indian classical music. This was a crossover design, so every subject went through one intervention with one session with Yoga Nidra, one session with control. So it was a randomized crossover design. And here are the results that we got. So if you look at, this is pre-Yoga Nidra, this is post-Yoga Nidra, and this is the mean response time in the Stroop task. And we can see that post-Yoga Nidra, the response time actually decreased. It's quite significant, peak 0.01. But if you look at the control, here also in Stroop the time decreased, the response time for Stroop. Now the other thing that we tested was the TMT, trail making task. And in Yoga Nidra, we again see the trail making task, the time decrease. And unfortunately for control also, this time decrease. We look at the EEG signatures, and what we found is in Yoga Nidra, there were, stage 1, stage 2, all 4 stages of sleep were there in the people. And this is what we expect. Right? When you look at the control, you look at, when they start it was, just awake. But then they also had all 4 stages of sleep. So even in the control tasks, we observed this. So then we kind of got puzzled. We
What is the unit along y-axis? Unit along y-axis time?
Yeah, this is the time in millisecond, I think.
Milliseconds.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So when we asked the participants, we took experienced practitioners who were aware, who were very familiar with the Yoga Nidra practice. So when they were doing Yoga Nidra in the lab, they were doing it properly and everything was fine. But they had no exposure to Indian classical music. So when they came in for the classical music, they were not allowed to move. They were supposed to lie down with the EEG cap on, and music is something that they did not appreciate. So they felt bored, and since they could not move, they just slept. So this is what we observed. And since they slept, then all these things would happen that you are seeing. But interestingly for us, at least the decrease in the TMT for Yoga Nidra is significant as compared to the control. So that is our saving grace.
But Yoga Nidra is so relaxing, and that once you are so relaxed, many of them actually sleep off.
Though they didn't say that they enjoyed the music. That's the thing. They said they got bored. And there's nothing to do because they could not move, because that will move our electrodes. So we told them, please don't move. So they slept. Yeah.
Like every brain perceives music differently. Like left brain and right brain also has a different role to play. Like if somebody is right brain, then their skills in cognitive development and all are like much more active.
That's right.
So when you are taking your control as music, and one of your subjects was left-handed.
Yes.
So all these things also are supposed to be.
That's right. So, yes, you are making excellent points. So I think, the control should have been much better thought, or, maybe, you should also have people who have appreciation for music.
Related to comparison between normal Nidra and Yoga Nidra.
Yeah, so one of the things that we are also looking at this EEG in a slightly different manner, we are looking at the number of years of their Yoga Nidra practice and correlating with that. There we are getting some results, but it's still not finalized, so still kind of, we're still analyzing this data.
I still want to make a point.
Yeah.
You see, if you remove the upper 3 layers of the cerebral cortex has 6 layers. The delta waves still persist. So, partially decorticated person, is he having Yoga Nidra? Delta wave is. So, these are the very serious questions. So, they say Samson writes physiology book, textbook of physiology. He writes that animals, if you remove the upper 3 layers of the cerebral cortex of the 6th layer, all EEG pattern goes, but the delta wave remains. So we do not know that where from the delta waves come and surface at the EEG. Now, is that partially decorticated animal undergoing Yoga Nidra?
So if we talk about the state of Yoga Nidra, delta is one signature, but then the person has to be conscious, and has to be aware.
The decorticated animal is not unconscious,
but aware.
These are the deep questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am not concluding anything.
That's why one important thing, as Professor Rahul explained, is that we are making some advances. Only now we have been able to publish these things. But as we proceed, such design of experiments, that will start emerging. Like what all can we put into the design, so that we get more knowledge, more data, more information, and it starts making more sense. These are anomalies which drive the direction of the research pursuit.
Yes.
Yeah. I would like to add one point as she asked about the music. So if you go and search on YouTube, there are multiple Yog Nidra versions. So I guess one major point over in this particular research will also that if you will, as you have mentioned that in classical music they just slept off. So even because if you listen to the Yog Nidra Art of Living version, there is a specific voice of Guruji, right? One thing, and then even again there's some music, smooth music is
there,
going
yes,
on
absolutely.
on the background.
Yes.
So even these two are the major factors of the subject who were having that particular experiences.
So here the Yoga Nidra that we did was a 40-minute Yoga Nidra, and this was by Chaitanya Ashram.
Right.
So this is not the Art of Living in the EG study.
Right.
But I think the music was there in that one also. There
But
was a
in the
live
second
music.
one slide you said no that we have practiced that Art of Living one.
That was the FMRI study.
FMRI
That's
one,
right.
right.
That's
So even that these two factors will be have because
Yes,
I
absolutely.
do practice yoga and meditation. So even at times if I listen to something on the internet, so yes, the difference in experience is definitely there. It's a very substantial difference. Because if I heard someone else and if I heard someone else, definitely the experience will differ.
But even for a particular person, it will be me, I am doing regular Yoga Nidra, but that also experience varies in different days and different.
Yes, absolutely.
That is also not constant. That is a
But if
same
you look
person,
at overall
same
statistics-
time, same duration.
The subjects were belonging to that particular tradition.
That's right. Yes, yes.
So they are already.
They're already familiar with it. Yes. So that's what we learned, right? You know, doing experiment with novices is very hard. And if you're doing experiment, better to start with the experts, and you know, in that tradition, because you know that is much easier to do. And just to conclude, I think we did see improvement in cognitive performance. We also saw lower pulse rates pre and post, which is indicator of relaxation. And EEG analysis does confirm that even in Yoga Nidra, people were getting close to sleep-like state, or sometimes even going to delta in sleep state. This is some more analysis we did, and what we found was that the more experienced Yoga Nidra practitioners retain higher alpha power. This could be related to, you know, conscious awareness, because you know alpha is an indicator of alertness and all. So maybe if people are more experienced and higher alpha power could indicate that they are going towards a Surya-like state, do not yet achieve that. And we also did the synchrony analysis. I have not shown you the results here, but we are seeing that, you know, brain is more synchronized during the Yoga Nidra practice as compared to the music. So, but yes, there are very good questions that are coming out. I think all these questions need an answer, and we need to study these further. You know, how do different Yoga Nidras compare, or you know, different traditions, and how.
Size of your data, size of data.
This was about, I think, 16 or 17 people.
That is not at all scientific. Into that you can't draw anything.
No, these are statistical tests, no? Statistical numbers.
Okay. The 16 number data size is very. Even one white crow can prove that crow can be white.
Yes.
So these methodology is all right, but always don't argue like that. He has attended very hard science. We are in a deep discussion, and you suddenly say that it is not science. Sorry. Even if you see one white crow, you can say that crow is white. So please.
No, what you are saying, that we don't say that. That's it.
No, so just to kind of, you know, these are statistical numbers. So we have done a proper.
This data size is to draw conclusions. Data size is too small. You can't say it is scientific.
Again, I was saying it is not scientific.
It's okay, it's okay, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, so I mean, these have been done through proper statistical testing, and that takes into account the data size limitations also. Because if the data size is small, then you know you will not get significance. Anyway, so I'll stop here with conclusion. So, Yoga Nidra is the state of consciousness, but in order to analyze this, we need people who can achieve that state, and that's our endeavor to find such people. Hopefully, we'll get one day and you know reproduce experimental Swami Ram, and also publish it. But in the meantime, we are looking at the Yoga Nidra practice, and it does lead to relaxation. It does lead to sleep-like state. It does show the benefits of the sleep. And if you do fMRI study, the brain areas that we see are really very promising. But yes, there is a long way to go. There is much more research that is required. So, yeah, thank you.